All right, Chris, thanks for joining today. I really love doing these. I love learning from people like you. And so thanks for hopping on with me for a few minutes. For those who don't know who you are, what's the elevator pitch? Like what's the short version of who Chris Bonsall is?
I think that depends on who you ask. If you ask my wife, I'm the person that'll talk to anybody, but I'm also the person that leaves my dirty clothes by the bed. Uh, if uh, if you look professionally, I'm the guy that kind of just fell into the ophthalmology industry by accident.
Mm,
They say it's a lot of more about who you know than anything else, and I happen to know someone who was the son of the founder of an EMR system,
okay.
so an ophthalmology specific electronic medical record software. And out of college, I did some odd jobs for this EMR company. Knew nothing about eye care, but knew that I really enjoyed working with practices and finding solutions that fit their needs. And so I've worked on the industry side of ophthalmology for the last 12 plus years. Had a little
Mm,
stint outside of eye care, but now I'm the guy that works with practices to help kind of improve upon their cataract education process to put the right services in place to make sure that they're really hitting the mark on how to educate patients.
that's awesome. How would you define patient education? I know that's kind of maybe a silly question, but like, how would you define patient education? And then maybe where do you think it should start and stop?
Yeah. I'll define good patient education, right? Because I think that there's a lot of patient education that we'll get to maybe throughout this discussion. But I think good patient education is something that's intended to provide clear and accurate information to patients about their healthcare needs, right? You could have education focused on a diagnosis, focused on treatment options, focused on care pathways. But really, it's anything that is intended to simplify that for a patient. And there's a lot of
Mm,
different modalities, I think, in which that could be done, right? Forms of one-way communication like videos and websites and content pamphlets, all the tools that we've used in practices for years. But then there's patient education a lot of times is done in the practice, person to person, could be done over the phone, like what we do at Navigate and like what a lot of really good practices do. And I think it's, you know, uh, the opposite of that is patient education can also unfortunately be defined as any information a patient gathers on their content.
mm,
Could be from Facebook or Reddit or ChatGPT. And sometimes that's a challenge because it could be outdated, it could be incorrect, it could be completely false on purpose, just kind of negatively skewed.
yeah,
And so practices, I think, when they look at how they should define patient education, it's first, how do we undo the incorrect information that patients come in, kind of those predispositions? And then how do we put a really great process in place to make sure they're only hearing the right things and leaving with all the knowledge they need to? And sometimes
mm,
that's multiple touch points across the patient journey. So
mm,
you ask where it should start and where it should end. I think there's no such thing as too soon to start patient education, right? Particularly in the cataract space, having a really great a relationship with your referring optometrist for a group that gets a lot of external referrals. That starts, you can make sure that no matter which referring optometrist a patient comes in from, maybe they need to have the same foundational knowledge. And that's really hard to do when they're coming from different sources.
mm,
And that education continuum should continue when they schedule an appointment with your practice, rather, when before they walk in the door, all throughout their journey when they're actually in your clinic. And then that education should continue even after they've had their surgery,
mm.
because you may be able to turn that patient into a fan for life who could, through word of mouth, get you 10 more patients.
Yeah.
So I don't know
Mm,
that there is a start and stop. I think it's kind of a nice
continue.
circle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now it makes a lot of sense. What are the most common reasons that you come across in terms of why practices don't take patient education seriously?
Um, I I'm going to say this. Maybe there's an example I could find if I look back long enough. But in the 4 years we've been doing this navigate thing, right? So educating patients before they walk in the door for their evaluation. I've spoken with hundreds of practices on their education process, kind of what they take seriously, what they find most important in that process. I don't think I've ever gotten off the call feeling like the education component wasn't prioritized or wasn't taken
Mm,
like seriously. Like they didn't. No practice puts it off and says we don't really care about that. But I do
mm,
think there's this sense of, well, we're doing good enough, right? And the status quo is fine. I think I just got an email yesterday. Like, we're comfortable with the status quo. We're seeing patients come through the process. We're seeing a relatively acceptable premium adoption conversion. We're seeing patients not come back with too many concerns, or buyer's remorse. And so I think there's this kind of feeling of let's rest on our laurels and let's just keep doing what we've done because it
Mm.
works. So maybe that's kind of if in our sense they're not taking it seriously enough, I would change that maybe to um, should they not consider all the potential downstream impacts that patient education could have on their patient journey, on their clinical efficiency, on things like premium and elective adoption, um, that I think if it was viewed from a different lens, just identifying all those value, it would be viewed maybe a little more, to your word, seriously, but just with a little bit more um, potential impact that it can have when viewed again, maybe a little bit more. Um, I don't know, put a little more value on the pre-education act component.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Where should a practice start? So if someone responds the opposite way they did in that email, which is they were kind of satisfied with status quo, if someone's not satisfied with the status quo, there's so many different touch points throughout the patient journey from when they first engage the practice all the way through consult and procedure and post-op and all these things. Where are there a handful of places that a practice should start, or is the answer literally just do all of it?
I don't know anyone's going to be able to do all of it. So I think the
Right.
best thing to do, right, is the age old quote: "You can't improve what you don't measure." Right,
Yeah.
and this, we're here 13 days into the new year, and for a lot of groups, and for our business as well, I imagine for what you do at Boost, you put a bow on 2025, and you look at how can we do better in 2026, and the only way to do that is identify and map out what you're doing today to see where you could find those gaps. So kind of my recommendation to practices that do raise their hand and say, we'd like to see what we can do maybe a little differently. We'd like to see if we can improve upon the patient journey. Audit your current process, map it out, document every step, try and see if any gaps immediately jump out at you. I think probably similar to what you see when working with prospective Boost clients. It's maybe there's a problem that the practice either they know they have or they don't always know they have it, but they don't recognize just
Mm.
how much it's impacting everything else downstream. And so by mapping out that journey and identifying, hey, where are we touching patients? Every step, every different format. Are we sending them packets? Are we sending them videos? Do we have that really great touch point from the third party referring optometrist, like I mentioned earlier? Uh, identify where those holes are, and then in within there, you probably at each practice we work with, they have great people, they have great staff that they're taking on a good chunk of this education today when the patient maybe hears about their options and their journey for the first time in office. But getting really granular with what language is that person using, is the technician using, and the surgical counselor, because it's easy to forget that for these practices, we're talking about cataract surgery all day, every day, and it's just common discussion. The acronyms all make sense to us. The toric lenses and multifocal lenses, presbyope, different terms that a patient may never have heard before, or maybe the first time they're hearing it. So it's important to look at the language you're using, making sure that you're kind of educating patients at a fifth grade level.
Mm.
And so all those things, unless you go through the journey as if you're a patient, if I was talking to a practice administrator, I would recommend, go sit through a cataract eval, right? Go listen to how your counselors are talking. Go look at your content that you're sending to the patients and check what the words that are used on your website. Make sure it all sounds cohesive. Make sure the same language is being used. Um, and then lastly, I'd say if you identify all those things are in really great shape, but you recognize that you just need to do more on the front end, which is what we propose, we advocate for highly, is educating earlier in the process with a human approach. If you can do it yourself in the practice, by all means, absolutely do it, right? Have one of your team members add in a phone call to the patients before they walk in the door. Give them a chance to ask questions, get comfortable, reduce their fear and anxiety, but don't do it halfway, or don't commit to calling if it's going to be the side of the desk job for a person, because the patients are going to be able to uh, are not going to get the answers they need if it's just phone tag back and forth,
Right.
right? So you can align the right people to the right roles. And if you don't have the opportunity to do that with the people you have, look for partnering with a third party, right?
Yeah.
They can't make the phone calls for the leads, call Boost. They can't make the phone calls for education, call Navigate. That's why companies like us exist, I think.
Yeah. That's really good. Where's the best place online for people to connect with you if they want to connect with you, follow you? Where's the best place to do that?
Yeah, obviously our website's got some great information, I think, about what we feel the value is of pre-education, navigatepatient.com. We're fairly active on LinkedIn. So we've got, our corporate page. We'll post information. We'll post samples of patient calls. So if you ever just
I
want a
like
quick,
those. Yeah.
yeah, nothing. When you ask me my elevator pitch for Chris, I'll kind of go back to that and say, right now I'm the person who feels really fulfilled because when I get to go and listen to what our marketing team posts, those 90-second calls or the 90-second endings of these calls where a
Yeah.
patient in tears, thankful that they got to talk to a person,
Yeah.
it makes me feel happy that I get to be a part of what we do here every day. So follow us on LinkedIn, and then I'm fairly active on my LinkedIn profile as well. And I'd love to engage with a practice, even if they don't think Navigate's a good fit for them, just to talk about their education process. And we'd love to guide you through what you're doing on your own today as well.
Love it. Thanks, Chris. And I really appreciate you joining me.
I appreciate you taking the time, Kate. Thanks for having me.